morning, everyone. Mayor Dinkins, Ms. Diamonstein-Spielvogel, Liz and Eve Abzug, distinguished guests, Borough President Brewer. I want to thank you all for coming today. My name is Bill Greenberg, and I'm the president of the board of Square Arch Realty, which owns this building. And on behalf of the entire 25th Avenue community, I'd like to welcome everyone here on this beautiful day. I'd also like to thank the Historic Landmarks Preservation Center for organizing this event in honor of one of our most illustrious former residents, Bella Abzug. I'd also like to give a small shout out to the current resident of Bella Abzug's apartment, young Evelyn over here. I grew up in a different city, in a different place, and so I didn't know Bella Abzug very well. So I'll defer to those sitting here to give a more full account of her accomplishments. Although I will say, in preparation for this event, I did spend some time on the internet and reading about Bella's life, and I was really struck by the power of it all and everything she accomplished. It's the kind of things that we don't see much today in our public servants now. From co-authoring the Freedom of Information Act to what has become known today as Title IX, being the first woman to run for U.S. Senate from New York, and the first woman to run for mayor of New York City. Bella Abzug was ahead of her time and blazed the path for those, especially women, who came after her. I also had the great opportunity to have lunch with one of her daughters, Liz, a couple of weeks ago, who told me more about what she was like as a mother and her family life, and what it was like to grow up in such a family, and how her mother has inspired her own professional life working with young women at the Bella Abzug Leadership Institute. I didn't know Bella at all, but according to Liz, I think I got at least one thing right. I arranged to have the plaque in honor of Bella Abzug arranged on the other side of the one from it. So with that, I'd like to introduce our next speaker.
To the left, right.
I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Phil Coltoff. Phil was president of the Children's Aid Society for many years, the CEO of the Children's Society for many years, and was my predecessor as president of the board here. So with that, I'll give it to Phil.
Thank you, Bill. And again, thank so many of you for joining in this celebration. Our building is becoming known for these. As Bill said, and Barbaralee is so active in various events. Last year's event at Caucus, and today's event for Bella. And she made sure, as some of you commented, that Bella's medallion is considerably to the left of Ed's. I was not a resident here when Bella and her family lived here. But I did know Bella in the political world of New York City. I was, as Bill mentioned, I was the president of Children's Aid Society. And while we are, and still Children's Aid is non-political, we knew how to back the right candidates. And Bella was one of the candidates that we so active in, and her campaign manager from her first election in 1970 is here with us. So, are you running another campaign there? Arnie Weiss. You run? No?
She wore me out.
Well, I really am just here to say hi, to have welcome all of you. Edie Windsor is with us. Barbaralee Diamonstein-Spielvogel, who, as I said to her a moment ago, is one of the permanent members of government in New York. Doesn't matter who's at City Hall, who the mayor is, she's there and chairs this wonderful landmarks preservation center. So with that, I am going to introduce Barbaralee, and just to say that we're not planning in the near future, I think Bill would and the board of the building would agree. We're not planning any new medallion ceremonies in the near future. But later on, we hope to have more medallions outside. Thanks much for coming, and I give you this wonderful woman who is herself a landmark in New York City. Barbara.
Thank you, Phil. And thank you all for coming. A warm welcome to all of you, lovers of New York, who are gathered here today to honor and celebrate the life and work of Congresswoman Bella Abzug here at one of her former residences, 2 Fifth Avenue. And Barbaralee Diamonstein-Spielvogel, the chair of the Historic Landmarks Preservation Center and the New York City Landmarks 50 Alliance. New York City will be celebrating in April of 2015 the 50th anniversary of the passage of the New York City Landmarks Law. The Landmarks 50 Alliance is a committee of 141 and still growing. 141 distinguished and dedicated individuals and organizations committed to informing the public about the past, the present, and the future of historic preservation and its larger relevance in our city. Our thanks to the Historic Districts Council, the advocate for all the historic districts, especially Simeon Bankoff, its executive director, and without the board, the residents, the chair, William Greenberg, currently, of 2 Fifth Avenue. Thank you all for being present, and thank you for your hospitality and your assist in making this ceremony possible. Now to Bella. Born in the Bronx to Russian Jewish immigrants and known by many as Battling Bella for her outspoken advocacy, Bella Abzug was a graduate of the then all-girls Walton High School and all-women's Hunter College. In 1947, she was graduated from Columbia Law School and admitted to the bar that year. She was a noted labor, leftist, and civil rights lawyer. Much of her work was pro bono defense in support of civil rights and for the advancement of women's rights. When you hear just a few of the things that she accomplished, the previous speaker who said she was well ahead of her time spoke the truth. A co-founder of Women's Strike for Peace in 1961, more than 50 years ago, the National Women's Peace Protest, and the National Women's Political Caucus in 1971 that was created to increase women's participation in politics. Bella, as you all know by now, was one of the most visible and vocal supporters of reproductive rights and the still unratified, getting closer, Equal Rights Amendment. She once observed that the value of feminism went beyond a political philosophy or movement relating to the rights of women. It's a vision of what we love and how we would like society to be, a new, just, and humane order. With that vision, she entered politics with a successful run for Congress in 1970, fully embraced her role as a relentless proponent of social justice. On her very first day as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, Bella introduced a bill to end the Vietnam War. In 1975, she introduced the first Congressional gay rights bill, almost 4 decades before such a bill would pass the Senate, and as you know, still lingers in the House. After an unsuccessful bid for the U.S. Senate in 1976, she left the House in 1977 and did not again hold elected office. In 1991, she co-founded the Women's Environmental Development Organization, an organization supporting women's rights in global policy. She was married to lawyer Martin Abzug from 1944 until his death in 1988. They raised two daughters, Eve and Liz, who are here with us today. And now to begin our program. A veteran of the United States Marine Corps during World War II, Mayor David Dinkins began his career in public service in 1966 as a New York State Assemblyman representing the 78th District. In succession, he then became president of the New York City Board of Elections, city clerk, Manhattan Borough president, prior to his election in 1989 as the city's first African-American mayor. During his administration, he instituted the Safe Streets Model criminal justice plan and established beacon schools that provided community social services. A founding member of the New York State Black and Puerto Rican Legislative Caucus, the New York State Council for Black Elected Democrats, and 100 Black men, Mayor Dinkins is currently a professor in the practice of public affairs at Columbia School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia University. It gives me great personal pleasure to introduce Mayor David Dinkins.
If I'd gotten introductions like that when I was running in '93, I might have gotten reelected. But I thank you so much, good friend. And I'm so pleased that the ambassador is here with us today.
Thank you, Mr.
Carl Spielvogel. He's a wonderful man. But the reason he's so good is his bride. Right. I have a bride, but my bride and I have been nuptialated for 61 years. I always looked upon Bella as a comrade in the trenches. Earlier this year, I was honored to receive the Bella Fellow Award from Bella Abzug Leadership Institute, founded by daughter Liz. And I was real proud to get it. Bella and I both had a good number of campaigns between the two of us. It's a toss-up as to who ran more times. I ran for Manhattan Borough President 3 times before I succeeded. People used to say to me, "What do you do?" And I'd say, "I run for Borough President." As those of you here can recall, much later in her career, I was privileged to appoint Bella to serve as the chair of the Commission on the Status of Women. And very proud to be able to do so. Bella gave us an unparalleled example of civic responsibility and commitment to fairness as an outspoken civil rights lawyer, a liberal opposed to the Vietnam War, early advocate for gay rights back in the 70s when she stood practically alone on that issue. You notice what the Supreme Court just did?
Yeah, we did notice.
Very interesting. Incidentally, I am privileged to perform a marriage ceremony. You see, when I left office, I went to Shelley Silver and I said, I never asked you for anything. That's what people say to politicians. They amended the law. They called it the Dinkins Amendment. They amended the domestic relations law so that former mayors can marry people. And I have done 2 same-sex, 1 or 2 women, 1 or 2 men, but I've done a whole heap of them. I love weddings because it's always like that little one was out here a while ago. There's always a few little children running around. So weddings are a whole lot more fun than funerals and memorials. And I get to speak at both a lot. Bella gave us an unparalleled example of civic responsibility and commitment to fairness. As an outspoken civil rights lawyer, a liberal opposed to the Vietnam War, early advocate for gay rights back in the 70s when she stood practically alone on that issue, chairperson on government secrecy hearings, battler for equal rights, numerous organizations and conferences devoted to elevating women to the decision-making power elite. I said just last night, I was privileged to speak to some students at Columbia. It was, the whole thing was about how people ought to get involved, ought to vote. And of course, everybody here knows how important that is. But I said, can you imagine how backward our country is? Women couldn't even vote until around 1920. Yeah, dumb as that. Yeah, 1920. Yeah. Think about it. And I remember once it was in Washington, something that Bella probably organized. And so a reporter stuck a mic in my face and said, "Why are you here?" I said, "Well, for openers, I got a mother, I have a wife, and a daughter. These things never were women's issues. Were issues for all of us. Really, truly were." Battling Bella was a true friend to the people of New York City, and we connected around a number of the same beliefs and battles. Her extraordinary passion for this city will live on as long as there is a New York. Bella once said, "Politics will eventually be replaced by imagery. The politician will be only too happy to advocate in favor of his image, because the image will be much more powerful than he could ever be." But we could never say such a thing about Bella. No image could ever be as powerful as she was at the time, at the microphone or in the trenches. It's fitting that we gather today for the installation of this cultural medallion to commemorate Bella. I am honored to be here to bear witness on this historic day with all of you.
Manhattan Borough President Brewer has an MBA from Harvard's School of Government. Together with former Manhattan Borough President Ruth Messenger, she co-teaches a Hunter College class and urban policy each spring. She has also taught urban affairs at Barnard, Brooklyn, and Queens colleges. It is a pleasure to welcome the effective and energetic Manhattan Borough President.
Thank you. It's a huge honor to be here today. And I first met Bella through the National Women's Political Caucus with Maggie and Joan and so many folks here, Brenda, everyone, all the women in the room who are of a certain age. We were all part of the National Women's Political Caucus, and that's where I got my start. But I want you to know that Mayor Dinkins was the first male member of the National Women's Political Caucus. At every meeting. So it's a big honor. Thank you, Barbaralee, not only for your efforts here, but across the city for making us remember our historic background. And I think because, you know, today is special, commemorates lots of things that Bella did. It helps to mark and identify our buildings. But it also just reminds us of Bella. There are stories in this room that can't all be told today, but they're all equally important. I want to think about Mary Tom, who has passed, but who talked about them in her book, and who I think of when I think of Bella, and then I think of the work in Beijing. Some of us went to the Beijing Women's Conference, and it was a memory that we all have. We have a memory of her going from woman to woman from all across the world. We didn't know who any of these people are, but walking down the middle of that street in Beijing, Bella knew every single woman leader in the world. Barbaralee mentioned her international work on the environment. And then, of course, there are all the stories from our city, and you'll hear more about them today. But we all got screamed at by Bella. At that, when I walk into Fifth Avenue, I think, uh-oh, I'm going upstairs now, I'm going to be in trouble. On the other hand, we all got support from her like from none other. It's how we met Scott Stringer, because as he tells everybody, he's her cousin. So we all know Scott since he was 14 and illegally on a community board. He was appointed. But he helped with Bella, the first woman, Marianne Krupczak, which is how I also know many of you. Bella helped her get elected to be lieutenant governor. That's how we all, as women political caucus members, got to know each other and were successful. The stories are endless, they're very personal, and they're very special. But to have a law, to make it a law that the street number, these are some things we also need to do, is clearly displayed on all Manhattan buildings, and then to put biographies on is a goal, and I know of Barbaralee and of Simeon, and today we're actually doing it. It's important to know where our city leaders lived, first and foremost because it reminds us to remember them, but because it gives us a perspective on how they saw the world. And we all know for 2 decades, Bella lived here near Washington Square Park in the heart of the village. And I know when she walked outside her building, she saw the history around her, but also everybody came up to her. That happens to me, but not like it did to Bella. You'd be walking down the street and people would just come out of buildings and parks and subways and just gravitate toward her. History is something she herself made again and again in her years in Congress, and later as an advocate for gender equality, social justice, and much more. I know she loved her Hunter College. She's still a giant at Hunter College. 50 years after the enfranchisement of American women in 1920, we all know, she introduced legislation in Congress to recognize Women's Equality Day. 1971, Congress passed the bill for August 26th, and all of us are still, every year, August 26th, we think of her, and we have to remember what we haven't done. We all love Martin. He would say stupid things that were hysterically funny. Oh my gosh. So I won't even repeat them because you're afraid to. We loved it. And we all laughed. It was just Martin. He was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. But the story is, the day after they moved into here, I think it was 1978, it was owned by the Rudin family, which is still very wonderful today. And the late Lou Rudin, who was in charge of, we called him Mr. New York. He was in charge of everything good about New York. He called Bella's office to see if everything was okay with the new apartment. Maggie Payton, who is really responsible for all of us getting elected to any office in the whole world, certainly me, certainly Bella. Maggie Payton, thank you. Maggie answered the call and said yes, according to Bella, everything was fine. And Lou Rudin said, that's funny, because I could hear her through my window yelling, this place is a dump. True story. If politics made strange bedfellows, then New York City real estate makes even stranger ones. What are the odds that Bella's former mayoral adversary, as we all know, the late Edward I. Koch, would move into 2 Fifth Avenue and wind up as her neighbor? Granted, they lived in separate towers, but separate towers are nothing between adversaries in the New York City mayoral election. That's why we have vacation spots like the Thousand Islands. Bella would probably have some insanely funny thing to say about the fact that even though she moved into the building first, her medallion is going up after Mayor Caucus. So thank God, thanks to Barbaralee, we're now evening that score. So Bella was a New Yorker who had a tremendous influence on me, on women's equality, as well as thousands and thousands of other people. And I want to thank Liz. I know she'll talk about the work she's doing with young women now. Bella would be very, very pleased. It's a true honor to commemorate the place she called home. We miss her very much. Thank you.
I have a short statement from a very close friend of Bella's who very much wanted to be here today, and I will read it. To all who remember the love and the love of justice in the home where Bella Abzug once lived, and to all who will now know this in the future because of this worthy HLPC medallion, with memories and gratitude from Gloria Steinem. And now, Bella's two daughters. We'll begin with Eve Abzug, a co-founder of the Bella Abzug Leadership Institute. Eve Abzug has served as a public policy administrator and advocate for the homeless and mentally ill for over a decade. She was formerly an associate director for residential services at the Bridge and a program supervisor at Greenberg. She now has a private practice and also volunteers in Maria Drost Counseling Services. Thank you for joining us. Eve Abzug.
It's a great honor to be here today. First, I'd like to thank Barbaralee Diamonstein-Spielvogel and the Historic Landmarks Preservation Center, William Greenberg and the 25th Avenue Board of Directors for making this possible. I also want to thank Mayor David Dinkins, Manhattan Borough President Gale Brewer, Claire Reed, Blanche Wiesen Cook, Ronnie Eldridge, and Harold Holzer, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. It's an honor, especially because my mother and my father loved living here. My sister Liz and I were adults by the time they moved into this apartment, so it was really theirs until they died. There were many things my parents loved about this building. For one thing, this is the first apartment in New York that they ever owned, though they had been in the city for more than 3 decades. They never lived in the doorman building, and not having to worry about packages being delivered felt like the height of luxury. My father, who was a very complex man, loved having a dry cleaner in the building, and for some reason, he'd always wanted an incinerator, and he finally got one here. They, of course, loved the view of Washington Square Park, and they used to go there to sit, just to sit. And my mother would always say, "You'll find us out there with the old people." You'll find us out there with the old people. Yet in so many ways, my mother never seemed old. She used to tell Liz and me all the time about how she changed her life at the age of 50. She never stopped working, advocating, fighting, and enjoying living. My mother was lonely after my father died, but I think she was very much at peace here. And I know she would be pleased, very, very pleased, that there is now a medallion here in her honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eve. Liz Abzug, the second daughter of Bella Abzug and Martin Abzug, is an adjunct professor of urban studies at Columbia University. She's the co-founder and president of the Bella Abzug Leadership Institute. In the administration of Governor Mario Cuomo, she was Deputy Commissioner of the Human Rights Enforcement Agency, Vice President of Operations for the Urban Development Corporation, and Director of the Empowerment Zone Program. Liz Abzug.
Thank you, Madame Barbaralee Diamonstein. I have a spam number that always says Madame. Chair of the Historic Landmarks Preservation Center for really making this possible today. I'd like to thank Bill Greenberg, the chair of 2/5 Co-op Board, Mayor Dinkins, who Mom loved and who I know you did, and truly a feminist. The borough president, Gale Brewer, who I go way back with, Mom goes way back with, and really understood the nuances of who she was, and my father, Martin, and also Councilmember Ronnie Eldridge, Claire Reed, who will be speaking in a minute, is one of Mom's oldest friends, and our poor brother, Harold Holzer, who couldn't be here today because he had an operation. First of all, I want to say, when you called about a year ago to, Barbaralee called to say we want to do this, I couldn't tell you how thrilled I was that you offered and that this was going to happen. We can't thank you enough for proposing this and for Bill Greenberg shepherding this through the board. As my sister said, Mom and Dad really did love living in this apartment. Our family had some wonderful times here. There were political fundraisers, family dinners, cocktail parties. I have great memories myself because I stayed here a lot when I was in law school and before that, when I would be inside the apartment with my parents and they'd be looking out on the parade, on the various parades, on the Gay Pride March, on the Halloween parades, and countless demonstrations, and how funny they would make commentaries about the various incredible outfits and contingents in these various parades. And my mother would say, I should be there. I have the best hats, the best costumes. My parents, as my sister said, loved sitting in Washington Square Park, taking in the sun, concerts, something they did both right up to their deaths. In fact, my father jogged around the park every morning, which was something that he was doing on the morning that he died in 1986, jogging around the park in a very, very, very hot, humid day. And this was during my mother's last campaign for elective office in Congress, where she was running in 1986 to try to get back into Congress, which she won the primary. My father died. Many of you, the old friends and workers here remember, died massive heart attack in this place, in this apartment. So it's very emotional for us to be here. My mom would practice law after running for all those offices. I don't want to redo all the wonderful accomplishments that she had and that we know. And my father would sit at the desk at the alcove looking over Washington Square Park, writing his novels in the middle of the night because he wrote novels and short stories. The one thing you probably don't know, and I don't know, is Larry Kramer here by any chance? Okay, I'm going to do this and say this. When my mother and father lived here, and Mayor Koch moved in after, as she likes to say. And Larry Kramer, the great activist in our community, AIDS community, and other major activists, Norma Hart, one wonderful author. One day, he lived here as well. I think he still lives here. Okay. One day, when Mother came home from a very long day, she comes in through the front doors in the lobby and sees Larry pointing at Mayor Koch. They were like face to face, pointing and saying in anger, "You haven't done enough for AIDS," screaming at the mayor. My mother comes in and sees this interaction and steps into the middle of them and says, "Stop! Larry, you're going to be arrested. I'm going to have to get you out of jail. Mayor, stand back. I don't want to see this altercation." And it was like something that my mother always recalled because she said, "Can you imagine? Here I am in this building. Here's Mayor Koch, and here's Larry. And what kind of combination is this?" And she would always tell us that she broke up this fight in this hall, in this very lobby. So I want to just say the three characters, the three giants who lived in this building, and there are many others. Edie Windsor, who just won the Supreme Court case. He's a personal friend of mine and my partners. So wonderful to have you here and many others who will live here. The other thing about 2/5 is, my sister said, they love the convenience, they love the curved driveway where Bella's driver and assistant, Joe Nixon, who's sitting in the front here for 22 years, would let her off on a long day's work. My father loved the incinerator and the conveniences, and they loved the old-time feel of the village. They were true villagers, as I feel I was, and my which do not exist anymore, the theater, the Greenwich Playhouse, the 8th Street Theater, the Quad. They were really a part of this community and quintessential Greenwich villagers. And I think they felt that they spent the best days of their lives in not only this apartment, but when we family we lived on Bank Street, West Bank Street. So the only thing I asked Bill Greenberg when we had lunch, one of the things I asked Bill Greenberg, the chair of the board, we had lunch a couple weeks ago, when we were talking about where the plaque was going to go. I said, Bill, is that plaque going to go on the same side of the building as Mayor Concha's? He said, why? I said, you cannot do that. We have to put it on the left side and it has to be separate. So I'm very glad and I thank the board of 2/5 for doing that. And in closing, I hope one day, soon after Mom died, many of her oldest friends wanted to get a statue of Mom. We wanted to have it in Washington Square Park. I said at that time, I think that's wonderful and I really want to see that, but I want to make a living legacy to my mother and bring her incredible dynamism, her skills as a politician and a lawyer, and as a feminist worldwide and domestic, to the next generation and to the current generation of young women and girls. And that's why we formed the Bella Abzug Leadership Institute, which trains young women and actually girls in middle school, high school, college in leadership. So I know I'm getting pushed off. I just want to say one more thing. One more thing. I'm getting booed, and I understand. Is that I've been trying for the last 10 years to make a movie, a feature film, get a film made about Bella's life for all the things that you heard the distinguished people say here. There are a lot of people that would like to. Barbara Streisand would be one of them. Time Daly and Marissa Tomei actually agreed to play Mr. Tomei, the younger part of Bella. I mean, in law school, etc. And so, if any of you, I've gotten pretty far with it. There's a producer in LA that is very interested in doing this, Barry Josephson. Barbara is awaiting the screenplay. So I made a pitch. If anybody knows anybody, this is in the Bella tradition, always making a pitch. If you want to give me any connections around who might be interested in that, we would certainly take it. So I want to, from the bottom of my heart, thank you all. Thank you, Barbaralee, for doing this today.
Both living proof of DNA. There were two people who wanted to come today, and unfortunately both of them are not feeling well. One of them has sent along a message, Harold Holzer, a long-term devoted aide of Bella Abzug. He said he was always referred to as her good right arm. His injury today is to his left arm, and he finds it a great irony that is what kept him away. I have asked Simeon to read from a note, if you'll come forward, please, that Harold was sent on.
I wish I could be here with all my friends to unveil the plaque marking our beloved Bella's final residence at 2 Fifth Avenue. Bella was always strong and incredibly healthy. She never took a day off, and she expected the same of her staff. This building housed quite a trio of New York giants at one time. Ed Koch, who debated Bella for mayor in 1977, and Larry Kramer, the AIDS activist. Maybe the plaque today should have been placed in the mailroom to commemorate the rare but truly frightening occasions whenever those three had the misfortune to get the mail at the same time. Or perhaps the lobby, as Ms. Abzug told us. After Bella died, hand one thing to Ed Koch though. After Bella died, he declared his support for a statue of Bella at Washington Square Park. We never got that statue, but Bella lives on in our memory as the most unforgettable resident who ever lived here. If 37 Bank Street was the place from which she launched herself as a citywide and national figure, 2 Fifth Avenue is where she emerged as an international figure. Here was where she brainstormed to start her UN NGO, the Women's Environmental Development Organization, which has done so much for global climate change and the rights of women and girls. I send my love To all the Abzug veterans who gathered here to Fifth Avenue today, remember a giant who once walked these halls, and remember how lucky we were to find ourselves in her exhilarating orbit.
Thank you, Carol, in absentia. Claire Reed is a poet and author whose most recent book, Toughing It Out, describes her trajectory as a political activist. She played major roles in Women's Strike for Peace, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and in the successful campaign for Congress of Bella Abzug. At age 92, she remains active and on the boards of the Bella Abzug Leadership Institute and the National Economic and Social Rights Initiative. Welcome, Claire Reed.
You made one major error.
Only one.
I'm 94. I wanted, because of what's been said and everything, I was going to open differently, but I wasn't even going to tell you this. But there are two wonderful, very, very brief stories. That one was an interview in Canada, and it was on Mother's Day, and they named the article Yiddish Mamas. You don't know what that means, it's Jewish mothers. And the interviewer said to Bella's mother, first to Bella, she said to Bella, what do you attribute your ability to be so achieving? And Bella said, my mother thought I could do everything, and everything I did was perfect. And if a teacher scolded me, my mother went to school and scolded the teacher. And so at one point, they said to Bella's mother, what do you think makes your daughter so successful? And when she won Congress election night, they asked her, and she said, I always knew Bella would make it, because she always did her homework on time, and she practiced her violin without ever being asked to. And when they finally asked, it's another journalist said, how do you account for her success? Bella's mother said, I was there. I was always there for Bella. And Bella was there and said, indeed she was. And then this other little story I want to tell you was we were at an anti-Vietnam War demonstration in Washington, D.C. There were several, at least 100,000 people. Huge demonstration. And Bella's last name is very similar to mine. I'm Claire Savitsky. Her, when they came over, changed hers to Savitsky. And so Mrs. Savitsky is standing next to me and she's going, I don't understand. So I turned to her and said, Mrs. Savitsky, what is the problem? Why are you so troubled? She said, my Bella does nothing but work against this war. How come it still goes on? If I only had a Jewish mama like that. So very much of everything else, except one story. I mean, what I was going to write, everybody's already said. I'm bored with listening to it. But when I tell that story, when Bella was in Congress, we always spoke, she called at 3 o'clock in the morning. What did you think of the meeting today? She had to have my opinion at 3 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, so one day we're sitting together and she says to me, I'm trying to work on a women's political Congress, women's political caucus, and I'm having a meeting tomorrow of some of the women I brought together. And I remember saying, I never left my 1940 little girl vision of what women do. And I said, Bella, there are so many more important issues, like the war, Bella, and the people who haven't got jobs, and the unions. Bella, these are such important issues. And I'll never forget. Contrary to the picture of how loud and vulgar and crude that the newspaper people threw around because they couldn't figure her out. She said, she sighed, she said, Claire, there's one woman in Congress, that was Shirley, was Chisholm. And she said, if we don't do that, when will women be represented in government? And she was almost like, she sighed so deeply. It was such a heavy concern. And all of a sudden, I thought, oh my God, she's right. But God damn it, she was right all the time. That everybody attacked Bella because she was a feminist, as somebody here said. She was a feminist before the church was in. So they called her vulgar, rude, every. I worked closely with her through the years of the Vietnam War, through the peace war, through the years in Congress, through her years running for Congress, through her years in Congress. And I want everybody to understand, a more compassionate, sensitive woman I've never known in my 94 years. She was the best, most wonderful friend I've ever had in all my years. She was such a close, loving person. And I want you all to know that she was voted the most effective congresswoman in Congress by her colleagues, by her congressional colleagues. Yeah, and do we need that woman today? Believe me, while we have I'm not allowed to use vulgarities because Blanche was there. If Bella was here today, the world would not be the mess it is. We need dozens of Bellas to get us back in balance, back in shape, to rescue, to restore us to a world more just and equitable and peaceful, and a world that once was. Because of my 94 years, I lived through such a world. So today's world desperately needs to be put back in place again. Thank you.
Remarkable, clear. It was really an inspiring message that you shared. Our next speaker is Blanche Wiesen Cook, the Distinguished Professor of History and Women's Studies at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and the CUNY Graduate Center. She is currently working on the third and final volume of her award-winning, best-selling biography of Eleanor Roosevelt. For those of you who were lucky enough to have seen her in several of the episodes of the recent Roosevelt series on PBS, again, my compliments for your contribution there and our appreciation for joining us today. Blanche Cook has often appeared as a television commentator, and for more than 20 years, she produced and was host of her own radio program for Radio Pacifica. Thank you.
And I'm so totally moved to be here today with all of you. And many words have been said. You're all probably ready to go. And I prepared a very long thing, so I won't read it. I just want to say what Claire Reed just said about Bella's mother. Let me just say one thing. Bella Abzug, woman of power and valor, vision and heart. courage, commitment, and joy. And it's that joy. She was an inspiration for all of us, for peace and freedom and women's rights and GLBT rights and our planetary future. And I do want to say, as an historian and a journalist, it was Bella Abzug who gave us the Sunshine Law, the Freedom of Information Act, and the Privacy Act. And today, when there's so many journalists in prison for whistleblowing, it really is important to remember that Bella Abzug gave us the Freedom of Information Act to end the kind of secrecy and lies that continue to exist. But I wanted to say two things to extend what Claire Reed said about the needs for the future. And one is that Valley is doing the really great thing is we need Bellas. We need Bellas. And Bella's daughters have created Valley to create Bellas. What's better? And the other thing I want to add, I asked Joe Nixon when I came in, because I think Joe Nixon knew Bella almost as deeply and profoundly as anybody who was with her every day as her assistant and driver. What would you like me to say? And Claire Reed focused on her mother. And Joe Nixon's story it was about her father. Her father taught her Hebrew. Her father, her grandfather taught her Hebrew and expected her to daven. And when her father died, she went to the synagogue. And it was an Orthodox synagogue where men were downstairs and women were upstairs. And I grew up in such a place. And Bella went to do Kaddish downstairs, where she was not supposed to be. And she did this every day for a year, with the realization that if you just do it, it gets done. And nobody will stop you. And that was a big part of her vision. I just want to say...
Microphone back a little, Bella.
Back a little.
Because it's down.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not your fault.
Okay. I think I first met Bella when I was a student at Hunter. I was student government president, and Bella in 1962, 61, 62, and Bella was student government president in 1941, 42, and she would come and give speeches to energize us and keep us moving forward. And one day we had Eleanor Roosevelt who told us to go south to freedom, and Bella had been the Willie McGee case in 1945, South for Freedom, for all those years. And from there to Claire and I were very active with Women's International League for Peace and Freedom against the war in Vietnam, Women's Strike for Peace, and we did all kinds of organizing together over the years. When Claire and I were talking about personal stories to remember, one was Bella Abzug. I mean, there should be a statue for Bella at Trout Pond. And Trout Pond was near Bella's home in Sag Harbor, and we took her there when she wanted so much to swim, and we got her into this fabulous lake, whereupon she took off like a seal and went back and forth across the lake. She was truly amazing. Her capacity for joy is one thing I wanted to emphasize. And she had a lot of fun doing a lot of surprising things. She loved to play poker. And one of my own personal disappointments was, I always said when I finished my book, I really want to be part of your poker gang. And she said, never. You can't play poker. You have no poker face. So, that was very disappointing to me. One of the things that I wanted to quote, there's so many things for your movie. You got to have somebody play cigar smoking, Republican lady of the House, Millicent Fenwick. Millicent Fenwick said that Bella was the mother of us all, determined, heartfelt, headstrong, lover of humanity. You could always tell the right thing to do if you followed Bella. She said Millicent Fenwick had two heroes, Bella and Eleanor Roosevelt, because they always said exactly what they mean. They always meant what they said, and they spoke from the heart, and they spoke truth to power. She agreed with Bella about virtually nothing, but Bella was her ideal. And I want to conclude with Bella as our ideal. When she sang Falling in Love Again, she made us swoon and dream and smile. For all the fights and bumps, above all, Bella brought love and warmth and joy into our hearth and into our hearts. We love you, Bella. And on the occasion of her 75th birthday, we wrote a song. And we wrote a song dedicated to Min Kelber and Bella about Wiesen. Who cares about the oceans? We do. Who fights all the pollution? We do. And who can take our dreams and make our dreams come true? Don't give me three guesses. One, we do. Thank you.
We all appreciate these wonderful speakers who came before you today and shared so much of the essence of Bella Abzug. Now we will proceed to our Cultural Medallion. But can I tell you that Cultural Medallions are porcelainized enamel plaques that are affixed to the exterior buildings throughout all 5 boroughs of New York City to commemorate an individual or an occurrence that has made a significant contribution to New York City's rich cultural heritage and to create a sense of pride in our history. Most of the people or events that are nominated by members of the public. So I invite you to do so now. If you have verifiable information about an individual who made a notable contribution, excuse me, and they lived in a still standing building, no parking lots, welcome your nomination. And for the record, I should say that in talking with Phil in the preparation for the Ed Koch Cultural Medallion, we knew that one day we would do a Bella Abzug Cultural Medallion. And it is for that reason we took the long view and put the Ed Koch Medallion on the right and reserved If you'd like to learn more about cultural medallions, you can look at HLPC, culturalmedallions.org. And if you'd like to see more or participate in the remarkable work of the New York City Landmarks 50 Alliance, our goal was to have 50 members. As of this morning, we have 143 and still counting. A marvelous example of the involvement and collaboration of New Yorkers. So join us. Look at New York City Landmarks 50alliance.org and you will learn about our work and many of our projects. And now it is a pleasure to dedicate a cultural medallion to the many accomplishments of Bella Abzug. I've asked Simeon when we go outside to unveil and read the text of the medallion. But before we go, my thanks to each and all of you for joining us here today and for celebrating the life and the work of Bella Abzug. And thank you all to the speakers.
Working it. Look at this.
Okay. Thank you. Bella Abzug, July 24th, 1920 to March 31st, 1998, 2 Fifth Avenue, Manhattan. Born in the Bronx to Russian immigrants, Bella Abzug was a graduate of Hunter College, 1942, and Columbia Law School, 1947. A labor and civil rights lawyer, much of her work was pro bono defense for victims of injustice. A co-founder of Women's Strike for Peace, 1961, the National Women's Peace Movement and the National Women's Political Caucus, 1971, created to increase women's participation in politics. She entered politics with a successful run for Congress in 1970. On her first day there, Abzug introduced a bill to end the Vietnam War. In 1975, she introduced the first Congressional gay rights bill. After an unsuccessful bid for the U.S. Senate, 1976, she left the House in 1977. Though she never again held elected office, Abzug remained dedicated to social action and politics and co-founded the Women's Environmental Development Organization, 1991. Married to lawyer Martin Abzug from 1944 until his death in 1986, they raised 2 daughters, Eve and Liz.
Eat it.